Okay, my name is Lennart Lindstrand Jr., California Registered Professional Forester, 624, semi-retired, resident of Redding, Shasta County. Was born and raised in the Salinas Valley, Monterey County, raised on a small farm, went to a very small rural grammar school. There were 8 in my graduating class. Went to a small private high school in Salinas. Stepped up a little bit in size. There were actually about 85 in that graduating class. Then went on to Hartnell Junior College in Salinas. Did a lot of under or lower division work there. And then transferred on to Humboldt State. But early on, I really had a affinity to the woods in the forest. That goes all the way back to some summer vacations. My uncle had a place in the Central Sierras where we spent summer vacations. It was a great place to get out of the fog and wind of the Salinas Valley and get some pleasant weather for a week or two and before having to return back to school. And so really enjoyable moments during those summer vacations. And then, so I knew I liked the woods, but at the same time really didn't focus on forestry, didn't really know what it was. Until my, it was the junior year in high school, took an aptitude test to test for math skills, English skills, biology skills, and the like. And turned out this aptitude test showed that I had a strong ability in the natural sciences. And so with that, I was, when those results came back, the test was structured that you had pamphlets available for career paths to follow in these various fields. Like, if you were good with English, well, okay, how about being a lawyer? Or if you're good with math, how about being a CPA? Well, if you had a strong affinity towards natural resources or biological sciences, then here's a bunch of pamphlets that would take you into either fish and wildlife or forestry. And I guess the one that caught my eye the most was this picture of a guy out cruising timber, big old yellow pine, bright sunny day, snow on the ground, so it was wintertime, and his red Mackinac on snowshoes. And I said, hey, I could get into that. Decided at that point that, forestry was going to be my career goal, and stated as such when I stated a major at Hartnell, and then transferred to Humboldt State in 1963, graduated Humboldt State with a Bachelor of Science in 66. Summer experiences, summer jobs going through high school were working in the fields in the Salinas Valley, pulling weeds, moving irrigation pipe, strong motivator to stay in school and know that there's better and other things to do in life. Summer jobs, my first one was working for then the California Division of Forestry on a range improvement crew. At that time, the state had a range improvement program where they would have a range specialist actually in each of the districts that would advise ranchers on range improvement techniques, primarily controlled burning, to reduce the shrub component and increase the grass component on their properties. And This was accomplished through controlled burning, and the state supplied standby crews in the event of a controlled burn escape. So I was on a range improvement crew. In between control burn assignments, we were part of the regular fire control structure. We were actually stationed in San Luis Obispo County, so we'd have the opportunity once in a while to roll on fires, and primarily served as mop-up crews. But yeah, that was the first summer job. Then when I was in Humboldt, I was actually ready to go back for a third season with the range improvement crew when a advertisement was made, an appeal was made for a research project, and they needed some technicians to work on that. And I thought, well, heck, lab coat, clipboard, hey, I could get into that. Okay, well, the research project was a slash volume study on a clear cut in the Six Rivers National Forest out of Willow Creek, 60% slopes, slash up to your armpits, and they wanted volume estimates of the slash component. So they were studying fuel loading. So I spent a whole summer wading through slash, making measurements, and then turning them into the Pacific Southwest Forest Experiment Station. My last summer job before graduating was on the Latour State Forest as a forestry aide. Probably one of the best jobs I could have had in terms of forestry training. Great forest to work on. Roy Ritchie was the forest manager at the time. Great teacher, great instructor. Learned a lot. Really helped round out the experience component. Well, the decision for Humboldt was actually a fairly easy one. I wasn't the best student, number one, so I found the University of California rather intimidating, I guess. Big school, high academics, and whatnot. But one of the deciding factors was the ability to work during the summer, because Cal required a summer camp between your sophomore and junior year. And in order to continue in school, I needed that summer job. And so Humboldt didn't have that requirement for a summer camp, and therefore I chose to go to Humboldt as opposed to Cal. Cal was kind of the sentimental choice because I'd had cousins and an uncle that graduated from Berkeley decades earlier. So that would have been nice, but the practicality is, having to have that summer job, I went to Humboldt. Well, let's see. There was Harry Wyant. Actually, after he left Humboldt, went back, took several different teaching assignments. I think wound up at West Virginia, and actually served as president of SAF for a couple of years back in the late 80s, early 90s, I believe. Great instructor. Trying to think of some others. Phil Annan, engineering instructor. Dry personality, but knew his stuff, could deliver it. Let's see. All of my years at Humboldt, and I was only in the 7th graduating class, I never had a class from the two founding professors, Ed Pearson and Jerry Partain. Both of them, during that period when I was there and would have taken their classes, were on sabbatical. And I just didn't have the time to sit around and wait to take their classes when they got back to sabbatical. You know, I had a schedule, and the draft board was breathing down my neck. So, you know, it was get those classes and move on. So, unfortunate that I never got to take classes from those two, because, you know, they founded the program and built it to what it was, a nationally recognized school. And being there in the early years was quite a learning experience, really was. Another early mentor I had was a fellow by the name of John Dowdigan. John was the service forester for Region 5 when I was at Hartnell. And I think he spent just about his whole career there, if I remember correctly. Very professional guy. I mean, if you could put Gifford Pinchot and a picture of John side by side, you know, you'd have a pretty evenly paired match there. But very professional, very proper, always wore a tie. But he was very instrumental in directing me in my career and saying, you know, there's educational opportunities at Berkeley. There's educational opportunities at Humboldt. Both are good programs. Getting one of them.
Good.
Yeah. He also emphasized early on when you graduate, you know, turn in your application for the Society of American Foresters. A very, very strong advocate of the society. I had a lot of early encouragement when I was growing up. My grandparents, my parents, a couple of uncles on both sides of the family, they weren't pushy, but at the same time they were encouraging. My parents the same way. Actually was the first in my family to get a college degree. Coaches, some great experiences there. Kind of hard not to get a little emotional about them. But Herb Smith, my JV football coach, great guy, actually played at St. Mary's when they were a national powerhouse. And then also one of my varsity football coaches was a guy by the name of Bill O'Brien. And, oh God, he was tough. He would have been, a great Marine drill sergeant. Tough, hard-nosed guy, but always encouraging. You know, he would work you hard, but he would encourage you all the way. There was a teacher at my high school, Brother Kelly. Oh man, what a character he was. He was raised on the streets of New York. Okay, so he was street smart. He was tough. He didn't take anything off the students. The boys' school, so there wasn't the female influence to maybe help keep people in check or something like that. It was it could be a pretty raucous environment from time to time, but he always had a pointer in his hand and knew how to use it. And so there was a few knuckles that get rapped now and then, but good math teacher, and again, because I wasn't the best student, and he recognized that, but he recognized that I wasn't really a quitter. And as such, he kept pushing me along. And I was able to get to where I got. Yeah. So, no, appreciate those people a lot. After graduating, as I mentioned earlier, the draft board was breathing down my neck. We're talking 1966. Vietnam was really heating up, and I was fortunate enough to be able to enlist in the Coast Guard Reserves. So within 2 weeks of graduating, I was in boot camp, Alameda, and did the 7-8 weeks of boot camp, and then was assigned to a buoy tender that was stationed off of Yerba Buena Island in San Francisco Bay, which is the mid-bay anchor point for the Bay Bridge. And the north half, of course, was Treasure Island. That was Navy. Then the other side was Coast Guard. So we were on the south side of Yerba Buena Island. And so the extent of my travels were as far south as Morro Bay, as far north as Crescent City, and as far west as the Farallones. And our duty as a buoy tender was aids in navigation and make sure buoys were maintained, remained on station, and also we were a supply ship for getting supplies out to the Farallones. A lot of things happened pretty fast then. I went to work for the Shasta County Assessor as a map draftsman. So my senior year, I worked a couple hours a week as a, again, map draftsman. And when I got out, they had an opening for me, and so I took it. It was a paycheck, and not certainly anything I wanted to make a career out of, but it paid the bills, got me started, and gave me time to start floating resumes and whatnot. And so that summer, started floating resumes and got an interview with Bill Beaty at Shasta Forest Company. August '67, that's when I turned in my notice at the Humboldt County Assessor, and then went over to work for Shasta Forest Company, again as a map draftsman. Bill hired me for a job that was going to last 2 years. And 43 years later, I retired from there. In 1967, again, there to conduct the partition. So my task was drawing maps, planimetric and type maps. The properties were valued. There was field crews that went out and cruised timber, and the properties were divided up according to share of undivided interest that each of the partitioning parties held. One of the rules of partition was each partitioning party had to take their share of the bad, as well as the average, as well as the good. So nobody could stack up and say, well, this is all good land, I want it, I'll take a few less acres. No, it wasn't that way. It had to be allocated evenly across ownership or value assessments. So once the partition was completed, roughly 1970, that's when the transition of management was made from Shasta Forest Company to W.M. Beaty Associates. Bill set the company up, and from that date forward, the lands have been managed on a consultant fee basis. From there, an opening came up on what they call the Shasta District, which is Whitmore, Shingletown, where we are now. and as a district forester. So I did a lot of timber sale preparation, timber sale supervision, marking, setting out boundaries, things like that, Christmas tree sales, a little bit of reforestation, but a lot of tract inspection, keeping the roads open, road repairs, that type of stuff. Everyday forestry, fun stuff in the woods. 1976, that's when the owner says, we have a lot of old fire scars out there. We're paying taxes on the land. We want to grow trees on it. So they elected then to start up a reforestation program. And as such, they needed a project forester to shepherd those projects and get some of that brush land converted back to timber. And so I was elected, if you will, to take on that role, and worked in reforestation and projects from 76 to 88. And then at that time, Jim Cochran retired. He was the land department manager, and so I was asked to step into the land department in a management position, and worked there as land department manager until retirement in 2010. And kind of the unique thing about the land department manager job for the Walkers, I was only the fourth person that ever served in that capacity. There were 3 others before, and then I was the fourth. So it's a job that requires a lot of knowledge of the history of the land, history of the families, and keeping track of owners' vesting lists, taxes, land records. So it was a very interesting job. I must say I took it with mixed emotions, because it brought me out of the field into the office, but at the same time it was challenging to keep track of the ownership and handle things like taxes, insurance, and the like. So very rewarding job. I enjoyed it. The Society of American Foresters, when I was going through school, I had encouragement from, again, John Dowdigan, who, a very strong advocate there. And the other was, most of the profs in school encouraged that. They says, it's you're going to be a forester, you're going to be a professional, you should support your professional association or organization. So that was a driving force. He also said, hey, it could be a resume builder. So, yeah, I joined as soon as I got a forestry job, out of school and got a forestry job. And I believe the application went in sometime during the year of 1967. I started out here at the Untitled Chapter, went through the chairs there. About that same time, Pete Passoff, who was then section chair, asked me to chair the Licensing and Ethics Committee for the section. So I got some experience there. And then from that, I ran for section chair. Had to run a second time. That's back in the day when they had actually contested elections. Had to run a second time and was elected. The unique thing about my rotation through the chairs there was that that's when the Northern California section transitioned into the California, or the Northern California section transitioned to the Northern California Society of American Foresters. And so it was a 2-year term. 1 year I was section chair. The second year I was chair of the Northern California Society. But it was also a time when CLFA was formed, so kind of a tumultuous time. I think the reason CLFA formed was well, there was a lot of things going on at Sacramento at the time. Faster than the SAF policy process would allow. In other words, very verboten to not follow the policy guidelines and the like. And so policy statements were slow in development. And even though the private industrial foresters supported the SAF positions, they were just too slow in coming. And a lot of them were probably not aggressive enough because the changes that were coming about, both regulatory and legislatively at that time, were fast and furious, and there was a necessity to really push back against that effort that was coming out of Sacramento. Hence, CLFA was formed. At that time, some people who joined with CLFA maintained dual memberships. Some says, I'm going to hang my flag with CLFA. So membership suffered as a result, and it is rather a sad thing, but nonetheless, that's what happened. I continued to maintain dual memberships, both CLFA and in SAF. I still believe in SAF's, or the two primary goals of SAF should be, professional development and accreditation of the forestry school programs that are out there, and very supportive of that, and that's why I've stuck it out through the years. Oh, the changes that I've witnessed in the last 40-plus years have been tremendous. When I first broke into the field, it was trees were all felled by basically chainsaws, limbed and bucked in the woods, chokers set, drugged to the landing either by skidders or by cats. Loaded with front-end loaders, very labor-intensive. You had people working the landing, you had people in the woods, in a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving equipment, pretty high-risk environment. Today, in the woods, it's, if you've got the right topography, it's mechanically felled, taken to the yarded to the landing, tree length, bucked and delimbed with a stroke delimber on the landing, sorted for species and size for eventual destination, loaded with a heel boom loader, and in most cases, probably untouched by human hands until the trucker puts the binders on the load. Much safer working environment, takes an entirely different skill set and labor force to make all that happen. You just don't turn anybody loose on a $500,000 piece of equipment that's computer driven in many cases. So a lot of changes. Technology has made great strides in forestry, and it's made thinning possible in stands. You look at the mechanical falling. It's made thinning possible in stands that would not otherwise be economically feasible, just by the ability to take that feller falling machine on a boom, reach into a stand and snip that tree off and pull it out without damaging the rest of the stand, without hanging it up. So it's really made a lot of things possible that just were not feasible back in the day when I started. Really to the benefit of forestry. The footprint on the ground is much lighter than it used to be. The ability to operate equipment on steep slopes with self-leveling equipment that's out there now, with the feller bunchers and the automated falling machines. Really a lot of great innovations, but it comes with a price tag. That equipment is not cheap, and like I say, you just don't put anybody on it. They've got to be trained. They've got to be conscientious personnel. Did we have to go there?
You put it down.
Yeah, the regulatory environment has really been frustrating. Particularly, well, you could talk forever on what's happening on the federal side, but on the private side, it's really frustrating because you've got a forest practice rule book that when I broke in, would fit in your shirt pocket. Now it's that thick and it's small print. And the timber, the rules themselves are, they're difficult, but there's a reason and people are able to follow them. The thing that I find so frustrating is the timber harvest planning process. It takes a lot of time, it's very expensive, and really I liken it to driving from Shasta County to Sacramento. You know what the speed limit is, and you're going to get busted if you break the speed limit. Timber harvest plan is a document you submit to the state that tells you how you're going to get from Shasta County to Sacramento and how you're going to obey the speed limit, and where you have to stop maybe for gas once in a while. Personally, I'd rather see all that energy placed in the field for better stand analysis, supervision of operations, and planning, rather than being tied up with having to prepare a regulatory document. But it's California, it's the state we live in. The bright spots. One of the good things that has come out of Sacramento in the last 40 plus years has been the Timber Tax Reform Act of 1976. I think it has done more to encourage investment in privately owned timberlands than anything that has come out since or prior. It added certainty to timber taxation, both at the land level and at the timber tax level. Prior to that time, you really didn't know what your taxes were going to be year to year. So with the TPZ zoning, your land is now assessed and taxed on its ability to grow a crop of trees, and your timber is assessed and taxed according to its value at the time of harvest. Pretty equitable system. Since that time in 1976, I've seen a tremendous amount of investment being made, day to day by forest landowners because they know what the certainty is. And they can afford to make those investments and know that, barring catastrophic fire, wind, disease, insects, and the like, that they will see a return on their efforts. Probably one of the best things that has ever come out of Sacramento. One of the great things that I think has happened in the, starting in the late 70s, and again, it goes kind of hand in glove with the favorable investment environment that the Tax Reform Act created, was a great deal of cooperation between the industry, between University of California, and a lot of the agencies, state agencies and the Forest Service, to conduct research projects that really had on-the-ground application. We're talking about the California Yield Cooperative that gave us the growth and yield models, Cactos and Cryptos. The True Fir Cooperative that developed so much information in terms of being able to not only plant successfully and grow true fir trees, but also nursery practices and storage regimes and cold hour requirements and dormancy requirements and things like that. Learned a great deal from that. Just a great cooperative environment during that late 70s, early 80s era. Okay, the last cooperative effort I want to mention was the California Tree Improvement Association. Two people that I think a great deal of, that had a great deal to do with starting it, were Doug Leitz and Bill Libby. At the time, people saw the opportunity to make some investments. The technology was out there to bring some of these tree improvement ideas into fruition. Doug Leitz had he was regional forester at the time, was able to bring some horsepower from the Forest Service into the program. Bill Libby, great advocate for tree improvement and genetic tree improvement, great geneticist, great forest mind, and they provided the spark, I guess, to bring the industry together to say, it's time that we put some effort into this. We're trying to grow wood on fewer acres, and we've got a country to supply with wood products. It's time we moved in that direction. One of the efforts that came out of, or one of the programs, I should say, that came out of that effort was the Northern California Tree Improvement Association. There is a seed orchard now that is cooperatively owned by various, the state agencies, CDF, CAL FIRE, Department of Forestry, and various private landowners. They all share in the cost and receive seed out of that seed orchard now, prorate to their initial investment. And it's been great. You're getting ponderosa pine plantations now that just are far superior to anything you get out of a open pollinated seed collection and wildland seed collection. And also they are now starting to move into a second generation seed orchard. Tremendous benefit to the timberlands of the state, and I think a lot of thanks is owed to Doug and Bill for getting that going. Most beautiful sight in the woods. I characterize that as a loaded logging truck heading down the hill, going to the mill. And the reason for it is that means from the stump to the mill to the retail outlet to the end user of that wood, there is a demand for that product. That means jobs all along the way. That also means revenue back to the land, to pay the taxes, to pay the management fees, to make those investments to keep wood coming to market. It might be a statement that people might take at shock value for a moment. I know when I first heard it, I would like to say it was my comment, but it's not. But when I first heard it, I said, that's kind of odd. But then you start thinking about it, and it's timber that pays the bills. And if you haven't got a demand for your product, you're not going to see management in the woods. You're not going to see those taxes paid. Those taxes go to schools, to roads, local government, state government, federal government, right along the line. So it supports the functions of government and the needs of society. So society, I think, wins out at both levels. They get a product that is renewable, and they get the economic benefits from it as well. It's a win-win, and you don't get that just letting it grow and let nature take in its course. Because Mother Nature can be a bear cat sometimes. Since retirement, I've had spare time to do stuff, and people find out I'm retired and say, "Oh, God, he's retired. He's got lots of time. He could do that kind of stuff." So, since retirement, I have been involved with the Forest Institute for Teachers in a minimal way, and then also the California Forestry Challenge. I've been involved there. Both very worthwhile projects. I think public education is crucial to our profession and to the industry. And if I could do a part, that's great. That's why I do it. And if we can get a couple of foresters out of that, that would be even better. Also, I've been a member and a director of the Shasta County Farm Bureau, past president there. Have currently serve on the State Board of Equalization Timber Tax Advisory Committee, and also serve on the Board of Directors for the Professional what's the name of it? It's PAPA, Pesticide Applicators Professional Association. There is a continuing education requirement for all pesticide applicators. I think little known amongst the general public, but it is a profession. It is highly regulated, and there is a continuing education requirement for those people that are directing pesticide applications. The association provides those continuing education opportunities for applicators, and it's a nonprofit, and I've served on that board of directors now for about 4 years. Again, one of those, geez, Len's retired, so he can do this. I was asked to serve on the Executive Advisory Committee for the Ag and Natural Resources Department at Shasta College. And that's, again, where my ag background and early years come from. You can't clean that dirt out from under the fingernails, but yet, they do have a tech program for natural resource people, And some of those people do go on to four-year institutions, get degrees in forestry. So it's a worthwhile endeavor, and I think it's really worth it. I think the faculty at Shasta College right now is super, particularly on the ag side, and they're doing a great job. They put out a great product in terms of their students, and I think the students really speak well for them because of their conduct and their level of activity, commitment to learning, speak well for themselves and also for the institution. One of the other things that, again, I got pulled into some time back, again, yeah, he's retired, he can do that, is grading for the RPF, Registered Professional Forester's exam. Pretty serious task, I think. Rather time-consuming to go through something like 20 examinations, plus or minus, 2 times a year, and apply a grade and determine a success or failure to each of the applicants. It's all done in the blind. You don't know who the applicants are, which is very fortunate. It removes all the bias or any potential for bias. And it's been a challenging but a rewarding opportunity, I think. It's one that I look at as kind of mixed feelings. It's a lot of work, but it's rewarding work. And I think it's a way of contributing to the profession. Okay, California Tree Farm Committee is an affiliate of the National Tree Farm Association, and it's a member-driven organization that supports forest management on small private forest lands. And one of the current innovations that has taken place within the tree farm program now is certification, so that buyers of wood products have some assurance that their purchase is coming from a sustainably managed renewable resource. And I serve on that committee. I've served on it for, it seems like forever, but it's one of those things that again, I enjoy, proud to be a part of it, but at the same time, it would sure be nice to get some young blood. And that's something that's happening, I think, throughout forestry, throughout the profession. And it's just not forestry. It's other fields. Trying to get the young folks involved is a challenge. You have to have something to get up in the morning for. And one of the things that I told the local CDF folks when I retired is, hey, I got time for this now. And they've long since, probably 15, 20 years ago, abandoned their regularly manned lookout program. But they still, for the ones that are still intact, they still staff them up during periods of high lightning activity. And so for the last 6 years now, I've sat on Latour Butte, which is just, over my left shoulder here. Maybe 10, 12 days a year. Pick up a smoke. It's one of those jobs that, is 10, 12 hours a day of boredom interrupted by moments of tedium. Is kind of the way I look at it. But every once in a while you do pick up a smoke and you feel a sense of accomplishment. And one of the more spectacular things that I've observed from up there was the Ponderosa fire when it blew up. Couldn't even see it starting. And because of the smoke that was coming off of the fire that was burning in Lassen Park at the same time. It was just the smoke was filling all of the canyons, all the drainages on this side of the hill. And the lightning storm that caused that fire went through at like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. The fire really didn't, I don't even think was reported until 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. And by that time, it already blown up. And here I am looking out over the horizon, and here the thing is coming at you. And it crossed the ridge that is that Digger Butte sits on, just down on the county line between Tehama County and Shasta County. Came across that ridge on about a 2-mile front, just blowing and going. Pretty spectacular view. I was sitting up there, no camera. Just one of those things. But at that point, there was nothing anybody could do. By the time it was recognizable as a independent fire, it was already running. It started in Battle Creek Canyon, just filled with smoke. Why I do it? Well, volunteerism, I guess it's in my genes, in the genetic makeup. My parents were involved in community affairs. My dad served on Board of Trustees for the local Mission Union School District. They served on the community club, fundraisers, to extra funding for school activities. My grandfather was one of the leaders of the time in his community, and played an active role in getting phone service out to rural Mission District. So yeah, it's just kind of part of me. I'm thankful that Sandy puts up with a lot of it. But again, to me, again, you have to have something to get up in the morning for. So being active like this is better than sitting back and watching the grass grow. I don't fish it much anymore, primarily because the cost of the license just aggravates me no end, and also the regulations. I mean, it's almost as thick as the forest practice rule book right now. And it takes a lawyer sometimes just to figure out, well, can I fish here? No, not today. Can I fish over here? Yeah, probably. And how many can I keep? So, and in terms of golf, I don't know which end of a club to pick up. So, the staying active is probably my substitute for golf and fishing and the like. The other thing I do is, again, it comes back to dirt under the fingernails, grow a pretty productive vegetable garden every year, which I'm, hopefully with the weather starting to improve here, I can get to it, because right now it's been too doggone wet to do anything about it. That's a tough one. I think the reason the nation politically right now is really divided, just politics alone. But then when you get down to forestry and natural resources issue, I think we're really too many generations removed from the farm. And so people really don't have a understanding of where their food comes from, where their shelter comes from. They just think, milk comes from the grocery store and lumber comes from the lumber yard. And so the things that have to happen to provide those products to the consumer to many is a mystery. Some of the practices, cutting a tree, are emotionally driven. So it's a tough issue. Public education, public outreach is probably one of the better things you can do. But the way I've described it over the years is that a environmentalist argument can be driven home with a 30-second soundbite. A voiceover on a vast clear cut or something like that. It doesn't even have to be in the United States. It can be just a clear cut. You're looking at brown ground stumps. Very emotionally driven. On the other hand, to convince somebody that some of these forest management practices are necessary, that they are sustainable, that we are dealing with a forest product that is renewable. You have to engage somebody's intellect for a long period of time, keep their attention, and be able to convince them that you're not out there to rape and pillage the forest, and that's a tough one. That's a tough one, and getting people to care, to even sit down and listen. I wish I had an answer. I really do. I think for somebody that is interested in forestry, that has the aptitudes, the desire, there is a future in forestry. It takes some dedication, but nonetheless, the opportunities are there. When you look at the demographics of the profession of forestry, particularly in California right now, there's a big age gap coming up right now. A lot of people that entered the profession when I did, retired or are retiring, and therefore, is there an adequate number of foresters coming up behind my generation and the generation that's maybe 10, 15 years behind me to fill some of those gaps? I do know that there are forestry positions right now that are going unfilled. And it's not only at the private sector level, it's also at the state level. So yeah, there are job opportunities there. Also, for the people that might think, well, there's no future in forestry, I would tell them, ask them, what are the three basic elements, things that people need to survive? It's food, it's clothing, it's shelter. And where's your shelter going to come from but forest products? It's a renewable resource. Steel, concrete, brick, things like that, they're finite resources. The wood products are, on the other hand, renewable resources, and just that alone, there is a future there for those that want to go into forestry.
Okay.
And to take that theme just a little bit further into agriculture, there's 2% of the population in the United States provides the food, the fiber that supports the rest of society. That says a lot for the ingenuity, the dedication of the people that are involved in those endeavors. An ideal forest? Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. One that is where growth and yield are, from the production side anyway, that growth and yield are in balance, that the other attributes of a forest, water quality, are insured, protected, that there is wildlife habitat available, for the critters and all the other public trust resources. And in a lot of cases, those features of good water quality, wildlife habitat are the result of good forest management. So I don't think we have anything to apologize for as a profession. I believe that there is a future in forestry, and proud to be part of it. What can I say?